is an odd character. He's pretty egotistical, if you ask me, and that kind of comes out toward the end. But on the other hand, giving Nehemiah some credit, he was a great leader. And so our notes on Nehemiah, we're going to talk about some qualities of leadership. We're going to talk about how to deal with criticism. Anyway, we're going to deal with some of those topics that Nehemiah deals with. The power of fellowship is another great lesson in this. So when we left off last week, we were in chapter 2, verse 10, where it says, when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard about this, they were very much disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. So, because they were disturbed about it, what did they do?
Gather up to go against them?
Yeah, they formed a discouragement committee, and they brought the Nehemiah and the Israelites before the discouragement committee. Have you run into a discouragement committee in your life before? Someone that says, this shouldn't be done, this can't be done, it's not going to be done. So, the principle that we looked at was, when we walk by faith, we are going to cross paths with someone who's walking by sight. It's going to happen. So, in my younger years, I was immature and I didn't know any better. And so the minute the Discouraged Committee knocked on my door, I scurried. And I didn't know what to do. It unnerved me. I just didn't know how to deal with the Discouragement Committee. I wish that I had read Nehemiah, because I think that he does an effective job of dealing with discouragement. All right, so we're going to pick it up today in Nehemiah chapter 11, and we're going to do what like we did last week. We're just going to read through this material, and in doing so, I believe with all my heart in the premise of Hebrews 4, which says that the Word of God is living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing asunder between soul and spirit. So I believe that as we read through this material, these words, that God will speak to us. He'll speak to you. So when He does, when God speaks to you, you speak up. So, verse 11. I went to Jerusalem. Who is the I?
Yeah, Nehemiah.
Nehemiah. I went to Jerusalem. Where was he? Where did he go to Jerusalem from?
Babylon.
Where?
Babylon.
Babylon, Assyria. Yeah, he went from Persia. He traveled. He didn't get there real quick, is my point. When the Bible just says, I went to Jerusalem. Well, he didn't just go across the street. He went to Jerusalem from a long distance. And after staying there 3 days, I set out during the night with a few men. I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. By night, I went out through the valley gate toward the Jackal Well and the Dung Gate, examining the walls. And I want you to remember that word, just underlining it in your Bibles, because the NIV says examining the walls. The King James says viewing the walls. The New Living Translation says inspecting the walls. But it's an odd, or it's not an odd, it is a different original word. In the original language, the word actually is translated in other places in the Bible as wait or tarry. Or we would say just hang out for a little while. In other words, have you ever seen Chevy Chase in National Lampoon's Vacation, that movie? I love that movie. Because in one scene, Chevy Chase takes his whole family and they gather up on the rim of the Grand Canyon to look out into this great spectacle that you can actually stand there and look at for days and hours and soak in the spectacle and just revel in the magnificence. And Chevy Chase says, mm-hmm. He goes on. That's the way I would do it. If I stood on the banks of the Grand Canyon, that's probably what I would do too. But that's not what Nehemiah did. Nehemiah traveled through Jerusalem, examining, inspecting, and viewing the walls and the condition they were in. The important thing about this is not so much today, but do you remember the day when we would go to the doctor? The first thing a doctor does is they take our pulse, and then they listen to our heart, and they look in our ears and look up our. They just do an examination, is what we would call it. But then they may just sit down over there and talk to you and say, tell me what's going on. How is it? To us, now that's not so much today because Medicare gives them only so many minutes per patient. And so they got to get in there and get through it. There was a time when an examination was where you took time to carefully analyze what the issues were, what the situation was. And while you're analyzing, based on your experience, strength, and hope, you're crafting a plan on how to deal with the abnormalities you find. So, when Nehemiah goes through and to these various locations, he's examining them, which means he's not doing it in a hurry. He's stopping, he's carefully looking at it, and he's crafting a plan on how to address this gap in the wall. That is a quality and a characteristic of a good leader. A good leader does not rush through, and now there are occasions where you shoot from the hip, where and sometimes you're right, but sometimes you're not. So he goes through examining the walls of Jerusalem, which have been broken down, and its gates, which have been destroyed by fire. Then I moved on toward the fountain gate and the king's pool, but there was not enough room for my mount to get through, so I went up the valley by night, examining the wall. There's our word again. And by the way, those two places in Nehemiah chapter 2 are the only places in the entire Bible where they are translated view or examine or inspect. All other places, it's translated wait or look or tarry. So, finally, I turned back and re-entered the valley gate. So here's what Nehemiah was doing. He was praying as he went. He was planning. He was plotting. And he was also promoting. And so those are good qualities of a leader. A leader will pray, plan, plot, and promote. So when he got through, he goes back to the Jews because I had yet said nothing to the Jews or the priests or the nobles or officials or any others who would be doing the work. Then I said to them, see the trouble we are in? Notice he did not say, you see the problems you have, don't you? He includes himself. So the point, it says, you see the trouble we are in, Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been burned with fire. Come let us, he says, rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer. In all these cases, he uses plural pronouns. Quality of a leader, number 2, is leaders are among the people. Most effective leaders are among the people, not over the people, but they're among the people. They replied, "Let us start rebuilding." So they began this good work. Movements are led by praying, planning, penitent people. One thing he did was give them a vision. And then who shows up?
That's so discouraging.
Verse 19. The discouraged committee comes along. Then Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and now he's got some friends with him, and Geshem the Arab heard about it, and they mocked and ridiculed us. Now, it's one thing when the discouragement committee is saying, we're upset about this. But now the discouragement committee is making fun of it. What is this you're doing? They ask, are you rebelling against the king? And so, what did Nehemiah do? I'll tell you what he did. He went to Jerusalem.com Facebook page and he put it on Facebook and he said, "Oh, sorry, discouragement committee people, look what they've done." Is that what he did? No. He walked straight up to Sanballat, poked his finger in his chest, and said directly to him, look at verse 30. "I answered them by saying, the God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it." He's saying, if God be for us, who can be against us? That's what he's saying. But he didn't go to the town council, or he didn't go to his friends. He didn't go anywhere else. He went straight to the critic, and he said, we are going to rebuild the wall. And this is why it's going to work, because God's with us. So, leadership quality number 3, when you do receive criticism, what's the worst thing to do? Give up. Put it on Facebook. That's the worst thing you can do. Don't tell somebody else. Go tell the critic. Go straight to the critic. All right. Chapter 3. Elisha the high priest and his fellow priests went to work and rebuilt the sheep gate. They dedicated and set its doors in place, building as far as the Tower of the 100, which they dedicated, and as far as the Tower of Hananel. The men of Jericho built the adjoining section, and Zachar, son of Imri, built next to him. Now, if you will take your pencil and circle in the next 2 chapters, or just this chapter, if just in chapter 3 you will circle every time you see the words next to him. So while you're doing that, we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 times the phrase next to him appears as they are rebuilding this wall. What was the most powerful component of that project?
Persistence?
Pardon?
Persistence?
Persistence. Yes. The most powerful component was the next to him. They had fellowship. We sang the song, or whatever, I don't remember the words of it.
Sweet.
Anyway, the most powerful component of that project was the fellowship. They worked together. They were activated by the Spirit, saturated by the blood, and they were dedicated to Jesus. Not really. They didn't know anything about Jesus. But that's what I wrote down there. I thought to myself, I got that great sermon. Principles of leadership. coordination, cooperation, commendation, and communication.
And he had a plan.
But they had a plan. Yeah, they had a plan in place. But I love the phrase next to him. And that is exactly how they did it. One of the most powerful things that we have as the Lord's church is fellowship, is working together and working next to our brothers and sisters. All right, chapter 3, verse 10. Adjoining this, Jehoiada son of Haruch made repairs opposite his house, and Hattush son of Hashbaniah made repairs next to him. Malchijah, I'm getting to something that's very important here, other than reading these names. Malchijah son of Haram and Hassab son of Pathad Moab repaired another section. It really doesn't say anything in this, but there are a bunch of Arabs and Canaanites involved in this rebuilding project. And they all worked together. There were Jews, don't get me wrong. The Jews were very much involved. But if you read the lists of names, there's a bunch of Arab names, a bunch of Canaanite names, and they all worked together. Repaired another section, and the Tower of the Ovens, Shalom, son of Aloshesh, ruler of the half district of Jerusalem, repaired the next section with the help of his daughters. Now that's bad. That they would list women involved in the success of this story. But that's another powerful principle in this project, in its success, is that great servants are our women, are the women, are the ladies in a church, in an organization. The work would not have been done otherwise. The Valley Gate was repaired by Hanan and the residents of Zanoah. They rebuilt it and put its doors and bolts in place. They also repaired 500 yards. Now, how many yards is a football field?
100.
100. So they repaired 5 football fields more than what they had to. Look, they rebuilt it and put its doors and bolts in place. They also repaired 500 yards of the wall as far as the dung gate. The point is, they did a whole lot more than just what they had to, what was right there in front of them. They did their work and a whole bunch more. Half the work in the world is done by busy, tired people. Now, isn't that the truth? Most of the work that's done is by a small percentage of people who are already overworked and tired and burnt out. And that's exactly what was happening here. They go on, next to him, next to him, next to him. All these times, they all work together. And you finish up chapter 3 in verse 32, and between the room above the corner and the sheep gate, the goldsmiths and merchants made repairs. And then who shows up? Chapter 4. When Sanballat heard we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry. At first, he was just disturbed. And then he began to make fun. And now, how is he reacting? He's angry. And he was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews, don't get me wrong. He did his job. And in the presence of associates and the army of Samaria, he said, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble burned as they are?" Tobiah the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, "What are they building? If even a fox climbed up on it." Now they're going too far. They're calling names, they're making fun of them, and they're saying that it's just not a worthwhile project. In this exchange with the discouragement committee, there are 4 ways to deal with criticism. We are going to be criticized. All of us are, no matter what we do. Whether it be civic, political, spiritual, whatever it is, if we are in a leadership position at all, we're going to be criticized. There's 4 ways to deal with criticism. This is what I wished I knew when I was 25. Number 1, consider the source of the critic. Think about who the critic is. Number 2, ask, why is this criticism being made? Why is it being leveled at me? Why? So, who is the critic? Why are they criticizing? And then number 3, ask, is there any truth in this criticism? Consider the merit of the criticism. Sometimes there is merit to criticism. And then 4th, and most importantly, does your critic listen to the voice of God? And if your critic is not listening to the voice of God, then that becomes a problem. Okay. So how did Nehemiah respond to the discouraged committee this time? Chapter 4 and verse 4. He told God on them. "Hear us, O our God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity." He's telling God to send them back where I came from. The Assyrians will take care of them. "Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders." So he told God on them. And the result was, verse 6, "So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half its heights, for the people worked with all their heart." Here's an important part, an important component of dealing with criticism. When we have criticism, you look at the character and the continuous demeanor of the critic. Because habitual critics always get angry. If they're not a habitual critic, if they're just a critical thinker, then they're going to come to you and deal with you directly and be critical and ask for feedback and response. But a habitual critic, if you really look at them, they get angry, they get mad if they don't have their way. So that is important to remember when dealing with criticism. Chapter 4, verse 13. "When our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated it, we all returned to the wall, each to his own work." What would have been a response in so many cases? When our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot and that God had frustrated, we all ran. We all hid. We threw down our tools and we took off going the opposite direction. No. We all returned to the wall, each to his own work. And the point or principle is, from now on is all we have. We can't live in the past. We can't undo what's been done most of the time. From now on is all we have. So let's return to the wall and get busy and get on with our work. So many times we lose heart, we begin to live in the past, and it makes us so dysfunctional that we can't even live in the present, much less move on. Verse 16 says, from that day on. From now on is all we have. Half my men did the work, while the others were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor. They adjusted. They adapted. They modified. They got the job done. But then verse 20 says, whenever you hear the sound of the trumpet, join us there. Our God will fight for us. Our fellowship is our rallying point. That was their rallying point. Whenever you hear the sound of the trumpet, join us there. So if one section of the wall comes under attack, they're going to blow the trumpet. The other people are going to come to that point of weakness. Our rallying point is our fellowship. And that's the most powerful thing that we have as God's church. Whenever you hear the sound, the point is when the church, when we as a body come under attack, we need to rally to each other's sides and not attack ourselves or not run the other way. Okay. Compassion. These are just some things that Nehemiah demonstrated. Chapter 6, verse 13 says, so the wall was completed on the 25th day of Elul in 52 days. 52 days is just slightly less than 2 months. They finished that wall. When all our enemies heard about this and all the surrounding nations saw it, our enemies lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. Also in those days, the nobles of Judah were sending many letters to Tobiah, and replies from Tobiah kept coming to them, for many in Judah were under oath to him, since he was son-in-law to Shechaniah, and so forth and so on. The wall was completed in 52 days, demonstrating the power of compassion, prayer, planning, courage, vision, perseverance, sensitivity, goal setting, priority setting, and emphasizing the dependence on God for this project to be completed. When it was completed, they called Ezra, who was a priest, and he read the law, and they all read it. And so in this reading, there was personal examination, prayerful consideration, and purposeful consideration. They not only thought of God, they thanked God. We could go on and on, but that's Nehemiah. It's a great story of principles of leadership, how to deal with criticism, but most of all, it's the power of fellowship and working together and dependence